for the Abzan aggro deck is the mid-range deck because it just has bigger stuff and more removal. And since that matchup has receded from the metagame, some of the better matchups for Abzan aggro are a little bit more prevalent.
This deck is picking up a lot in popularity right now as we are underway in round number 1 here in Columbus. A Temple of Malady is how Nolen's going to start things off. Segal will start with perhaps a Temple of Deceit. He's going to give it another thought, however. Brian Brown Doohan played this deck at the Players' Championship in Abzan aggro. Also got second place in a PTQ over the holiday break. Taya Steele, Andrew Tenjum, 9th and 10th place respectively in our Open Series event in Seattle, our first 20K Open. So this deck is picking up quite a bit, all based off of the performance of Michael Sigrist at Pro Tour Concertar here way back when.
And as I mentioned before, I think a lot of it just has to do with the receding of Abzan mid-range from the metagame. Not as prevalent as it used to be. The worst matchup probably for Abzan aggro in Standard, and now much less of a factor.
Sansep Citadel is land number 2 here for Nolen. So no 2-drop, no Fleecebane line, no Rashasha Death Dealer to get the party started. There's a Delta there for Segal. And this is going to be a Thoughtseize. So we'll get a look at Nolen's hand. You'll find 2 Siege Rhinos there along with a Murderous Cut, a Bile Blight, and a copy of Temple of Silence.
And you can see why people sometimes play Esper Control or Blue-White Control, Blue-Black Control, even though the deck's a lot less objectively powerful than some of the other decks, is Thoughtseize plus Dissolve against some of these aggressive and mid-range strategies. They just don't have a lot of threats in the deck in total. So if you can make them discard or counter their couple threats, they end up rotting with a lot of removal in hand.
Thoughtseize took care of a Siege Rhino. Of course, Nolen will have one left in his hand. Did pick up a copy of Wingmate Rock for the turn. Played his Temple Scryed. We're going to head back Michael's way, who just plays a Koyuz of Kolios and just pass the turn back over to Nolen. No 4th land here for Lauren, so we'll just have to pass the turn back over to Michael. Michael with a Disdainful Stroke at the ready for the Siege Rhino or Wingmate Rock. So not a bad draw here for the Esper Control player.
No, and Disdainful Stroke is an excellent card in this metagame right now. Nearly every deck is packing expensive spells. Even the Jeskai token deck has Treasure Cruise, which you can Disdainful Stroke.
See if Segal's going to make a move here or not. Does have a copy of Sorin Solemn Visitor available. You know, these Esper Control decks, they don't play like old Esper Control and Sphinx's Revelation. You do have to do some tapping of your mana on your own turn to get things set up. We saw Shaheen Sarani do that last year when we were in Richmond in his 2nd place finish. Now, Shaheen, to be fair, is known for playing expensive sorceries, but it's probably the direction you have to take this deck.
And Michael's deck is all about tapping out. Even though there's a lot of counter spells in it, 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke and several copies of Dissolve as well, this is a pure Planeswalker control deck. There's a lot of tapping out that's going to go on here. 3 copies of Ashiok, 3 copies of Sorin, 2 Elspeth, and 1 Liliana Vess.
He does crack the Delta to search up an island. Segal going to go down to 17. Though he's giving some thought about playing Sorin, and he's decided just to pass the turn back. So not willing to tap out just yet, as Nolen's going to top deck and play a Sansep Citadel. So land number 4 is here, even though it's on a bit of a delay. Siege Rhino can come down next turn.
And in fact, my apologies, Michael's deck playing 0 copies of Dissolve, just Disdainful Strokes as counter spells. So definitely trying to bias his mana towards white and black with just a touch of blue, although there are a couple copies of Dig Through Time.
Nolen's draw for the turn was a copy of Anafenza, the Foremost, and decided not to play that either. So he's refusing to play spells into the counter matchup that Segal could potentially have. But what's a big deal here, she mentioned no copies of Dissolve, though Nolen doesn't know that.
Yeah, I think Lauren would ideally like to chain together 2 spells a turn here, but I think that's going to be impossible just because his hand is so glutted with 4 and 5 mana spells.
And Rashasha Death Dealer was the draw this turn. It looks like he's going to lead out with that. So there's the 2-2 that has potential to be so much more over the course of a game. And that's going to resolve. Pass the turn back over to Segal.
And this is kind of an awkward spot for Michael since his removal spells are not well lined up for it. Hero's Downfall, the Death Dealer can just regenerate. Bile Blight, Lauren can just pump it.
See, what Michael did this game, you know, the turn that kind of made things a little awkward was the turn where he cracked the fetch line and then just said go. A little unsure of himself if he wanted to play the Planeswalker or not. He could have taken a proactive approach. He decided to take a reactive approach, and that might come back to hurt him here.
He's got to start casting some spells. He has a Divination in hand that's been rotting in his hand for a little while, but now that he's at risk of missing a land drop, I think he just needs to cast this, even though it might result in him discarding the hand size.
Well, there is a Divination. Picked up another copy of Divination along with the Swamp, so not a bad Divination there at all. See, he does have a full grip there. I believe a Hero's Downfall hanging out in the hand. And he's going to cast a Divination. It looks like actually just going to discard Divination, so his hand must be very good if he's discarding that spell.
Well, it's hard for him to cast. He's had it rotting in his hand for a little while here. And he has Dig Through Time already, so he does have the option of firing off another card draw spell that's a little bit more flexible.
The Death Dealer is going to come across here for 2 points of damage. This is an Anafenza. You saw Nolen play a copy of Mana Confluence. Hero's Downfall will take care of the Anafenza. So Segal down to 15, drawing. with 6 mana available, picked up a land and a plains for the turn. He'll deploy that, so now he's got 7 mana. Dig through time, as you mentioned, an option. Sorin has been an option for some time. Looks like he may have a copy of Elspeth in his hand as well. See a Bioblight too.
There's no big rush for Michael to do anything, even though his draw's been a bit awkward. He has answers for most of the big stuff that Nolen can do right now, so I think he can afford to take some lumps, develop his mana, and eventually get into a spot where he's overpowering Nolen with a play like Elspeth with Disdainful Stroke backup.
Nolen does have a Temple of Malay. That was his draw for the turn. Considering how he wants to move forward here, again, he's got the Rhino, he's got the Wingmate Rock. It's very clear that he has a counterspell on his radar. You know, the way that he's deployed his spells, be it Disdainful Stroke, be it Dissolve, whatever. He's very cautious around a counterspell at this point.
And if that's the case, then he may just say, all right, I'm going to pump this Death Dealer and just say go, not play into the counterspells whatsoever. 2 mana left over is a lot of insurance for your Death Dealer. As Michael's been unable to kill it thus far with 2 mana.
And that would fit into what his plan has been all along.
Yeah.
Which is leaving up 2 mana to protect this thing. You know, this is my one threat. Now I can afford to pump it, deal you 4 points of damage, move forward. As you saw Segal go down to 11. Nolen, let's play a Temple of Malady post-combat. He is scrying right now, and that card is going to stay on top, so he's happy enough with what he's found and passing the turn back. Segal may cast Dig Through Time now. We'll see. Got a lot of mana available there. This will be 5 of it.
Just trying to figure out what kind of mana he wants to leave left over here. I like tapping out here because it's so unlikely that you end up using your leftover mana for something. It would have to be a situation like you take a Bioblight with the intent of Bioblighting, untapping and Bioblighting again, which just seems very unlikely to me. So I like leaving the graveyard stocked for a future Dig Through Time when perhaps his mana is a bit more taxed.
That's not the best Dig Through Time we've ever seen. There were 6 lands and a copy of Event Hostilities. There was a Temple in there and Temple of Enlightenment. It looks like he's going to take that one with him. But I suppose you can make the argument, well, at least he's not drawing those.
Exactly. Anytime your Dig Through Time is bad, it's still good because it represents 7 draw steps that you're not missing.
Last Breath to draw for the turn. So Michael with a lot of options to work with here. At 11, a pretty healthy life total given this stage of the game.
Last Breath does allow him to chain together 2 removal spells in one turn. Bioblight plus Last Breath, in whichever order Michael wants to do it, will get Rakshasa off the table.
He just wants to make sure he's tapping the mana appropriately, so he's going to start off with a Last Breath. Nolen will respond, and then Segal will respond with the Bioblight. So does have to use 2 removal spells to get that thing off of the board, but the job is done. There's a Temple.
Yeah, Michael can afford to 2-for-1 himself a couple times here because his hand is so powerful and Lauren's draws are so bad from this spot. He has so many removal spells in his deck that, you know, he's glutted with dead cards as well.
Lauren gonna untap. Time to take a draw. And offense is what he's found. He's gonna just play a Wingmate Rock. No raid, but that'll get taken care of by Disdainful Stroke. Segal will very quickly untap and take a draw.
You may wonder why Lauren wants to do that. I mean, it's a non-rated Wingmate Rock, pretty anemic play. I think the incentive there is if he draws 1 more land, it sets him up to cast Siege Rhino and Anafenza in the same turn, and he can overwhelm 1 counterspell.
Here's an Elspeth. That'll come down. 3 soldiers are going to come along with it, of course. And there will be a passing of the turn. And this is exactly where Segal wants to be. Elspeth on a clear board. Not a ton that Nolen can really do about it at this point. He does have a Siege Rhino in his hand, but that gets outclassed by the Sun's Champion pretty easily. Looks like that will be where he starts. We'll see if this resolves, and it does. So Nolen will go up to 23, Segal will go down to 8. But not a huge swing in the game there. As he has an answer to the Rhino on the table at this point.
And Michael, with a very conservative control player route here, I think that a lot of players' instinct would have just been to use the Disdainful Stroke on the Siege Rhino, but instead knows that Elspeth's in play, no big rush.
Winslow Teeth going to come down. Oh, we'll sacrifice that. He's going to go back down to 22. Get a land out of the deck. We might see him cast that offensive this turn as well. But this just shows the power of Elspeth. Doesn't really care about the threats that are being deployed here one bit. So Segal wants to take a look at the graveyard, make sure he knows exactly what's down there. And offensive a card that's picked up quite a bit in popularity because of the Loop of Erebos decks and the Animator decks that are out there, but also just a pretty efficient threat.
Yeah, if you can cast it reliably on turn 3, it's a very good deal, especially if you're backing it up with a 2-mana play that can attack, which this deck has in Fleecemane Lion and the Death Dealer. And as you mentioned, the metagame has moved much more into a graveyard-centric place with Whip of Erebos strategies.
Segal going to very quickly minus Elspeth, take care of those big creatures. Now here's a Sorin, that'll pump up the jam on the attackers. And all of a sudden, 8 is going to become 14. He is out of kind of being burned out range. It would have been very unlikely, I think, if that would have taken place in this game, but now he's out of that as well.
Yeah, and he's also close to getting to a Sorin emblem, even if Lauren's able to get the Elspeth on the table. In this spot, I think Lauren's going to be very hard-pressed to beat that emblem.
There's a Windswept Teeth, Bile Blight, Murderous Cut, some removal spells there in Nolen's hand, but those are basically dead draws in this particular matchup. Just not really where you want to be at all.
And it's going to put a lot of pressure on Lauren's sideboard to have a lot to bring to the table because, you know, based on what you see in his hand right now, he's got a lot to cut.
Looks like Michael with a quick question for the judge nearby. Just make sure his planeswalkers work the way he thinks they do.
I think it's what happens with a Sorin plus on tokens that occur post-combat.
Sure.
Because Michael would ideally like to use the Sorin first in the event that Lauren has Bile Blight.
Yep.
Then he doesn't lose everything if Lauren decides to use the removal spell inside of combat.
That's exactly what you'll see him do. Use Sorin first, Elspeth second. There's a Temple. Take a look at the top card. Top card's going to stay on top. Send it back Nolen's way. Bile Blight's going to try to take care of these tokens, and it will get the job done. So this game will have a few more turns as we go. You see Segal's hand does have that copy of an Hostilities he found off a Dig Through Time. Disdainful Stroke over there as well in case anything does go wrong. Nolen going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth and go down to 8, get a Plains out of his deck.
I think this is just a very challenging matchup for Lauren game 1. He's got a lot of dead draws, and even the stuff that he has that is not dead, Michael has a lot of very good answers for. Counter spells, removal spells, sweepers. You get the sense it's hard for Lauren to get that much forward momentum unless his draw is very explosive.
Yeah, I mean, this game, you saw how he started with a Temple and Disanctive Citadel, and no Fleecemane Lion, no Rashasha Death, no turn 3 on offensive to really get the ball rolling. It was a very slow draw that revolved around Siege Rhinos, and you know, that kind of draw against this particular deck, I don't really care very much. You see Michael Segal is going to win game number 1 here over Lauren Nolen. Esper Control up a game over Abzan aggro as we head to the sideboards.
It's a funny thing. We talk all the time about, you know, beatdown decks capitalizing on metagames when they become too flush with comes into play tap lands. The same thing is true of decks like Esper. When even the aggressive strategies are not doing things for the first couple turns of the game, not only does mono red aggro become more viable, but so does something like Esper.
Well, we'll start with Lauren Nolen, the former Invitational champion, and we'll see 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Elspeth Suns champion, 3 copies of Back to Nature, 3 copies of Glare of Heresy, a Murderous Cut, and then 4 copies of Drown in Sorrow. Unsurprisingly, not a lot of hate in this particular matchup. Thoughtseize is certainly nice, but outside of that, I'm not really excited about any of these cards.
Well, here's the question is how much removal does he just have to get out of the deck here? He's got a Murderous Cut, 4 copies of Bile Blight, 3 copies of Hero's Downfall. We can say the Hero's Downfalls are fine to leave in the deck because there's so many Planeswalkers in Michael's deck, so we're really looking at the 4 Bile Blights and the 1 copy of Murderous Cut. 2 copies of Thoughtseize, and I would guess Glare of Heresy is the easiest thing to come in, and then maybe some copies of Elspeth as additional dead draws. But of course, the other creature removal, the Back to Nature effects, they are not very good here.
Yeah, I think, you know, if I'm in Lauren's seat, I might want those Elspeths before Glare of Heresies, though Glare of Heresy does have a decent amount of targets. We don't know if you're Lauren, you don't know if your opponent has Banishing Light in his deck, so you might want to hedge there.
Yeah, it does seem like a deck that would have Banishing Light. It appears that Michael's deck does not. I guess the clue is that when your opponent has Dig Through Time in their deck, they're a lot less likely to have permanents than answer permanents. They're more likely to go to spells. And in that respect, Michael has 2 copies of Utter End where some of these other decks might have Banishing Light. But I still think it's a fine hedge. You've seen a bunch of Planeswalkers, Sorin and Elspeth, so you know we'll have some targets even if it's not ideal.
What do we have in Michael's sideboard?
3 copies of Burmaz, 3 copies of Glare of Heresy, 2 Erase, a Drowned Sorrow, a Pearl Lake Ancient, 2 copies of Prognostic Sphinx, 2 copies of Negate, 1 copy of Fated Retribution. So I like the Fated Retribution in this matchup. I think the 2 copies of Prognostic Sphinx are totally reasonable as well. And the 3 copies of Glare of Heresy. Prognostic Sphinx does a lot of blocking and not easy for Lauren to kill also.
I mean, the 5 toughness of the Sphinx in this particular matchup, you think of the cards, you know, Siege, Rhino, and Offensa in some regards, because the Offensa can be pumping something else. A monstrous Fleece main line does a fantastic job of blocking. I think you're happy to tap out and cast that threat.
It's also good at taxing Planeswalkers, and you know Lauren at least has Sorin and maybe sideboarding into more.
Yeah, those Elspeths that we did mention. So I expect to see Prognostic Sphinx be in Michael's deck, and if he does draw, it'll probably play a pretty big role in things. These players will shuffle up for game number 2. And while we wait, we will talk about Season 1 of the Open Series here. It's 2015 all of a sudden, and we talked about this a little bit, but we're underway here in Columbus.
Keep in mind that the structure for these Opens have now changed, where there is a main event format. It's over 2 days, and on Sunday, we will have 5K Premier IQs for the 2 formats that are not involved. So this weekend, the main event is standard in Columbus, obviously. Tomorrow, we're going to have both a Legacy and a Modern 5K IQ. Philly is Legacy next weekend. DC is standard 2 weekends after that, and then Legacy in Indianapolis at the end of January. We move to February. First weekend is off for the Pro Tour. Keep in mind that StarC Games will be running regionals that weekend, so head over to our website for more information. Houston for the first time is standard. LA the following weekend. Baltimore for the first Modern Open Series, and then Grand Prix Miami. Stay tuned to MagicGP.com for more information as we get closer to that event. Dallas the following weekend, which will be standard, and then the Season 1 Invitational in Richmond, Standard Open Series, and Standard and Legacy as the Invitational formats. End of March, meet you and Matthias in the booth.
Going to be a lot of fun, all of these dates, but we do start here in Columbus, Ohio. Not too cold. Not too cold. It was raining this morning. Not entirely sure what's going on here in the Midwest, but as someone who did go up a couple hours from here, this is just par for the course. Probably going to be snowing on Tuesday.
It's only a matter of time. I mean, we're here, we're in Philly, we're in DC, we're in Indy through January. We're going to hit some bad weather in one of those 4 spots. You can't fade it forever.
I brought the coat and the scarf. Unnecessary.
Yeah, you were very dapper last night from the waist up, and then sweatpants as we went out.
Business on top, comfort on the bottom.
Right.
I suppose. That was kind of embarrassing now that I think about it.
I don't mind that kind of stuff. Who cares?
Who even cares?
It wasn't like we were at the Ritz-Carlton, dude, you know?
That's true. I can wear whatever I want to get my boneless wings.
They're not going to kick you out of that sports bar.
Whew, thank goodness. Lauren Nolen will be on the play here for game number 2. Not a great draw for him game number 1, but just a tough matchup overall game number 1. We'll see how things do change after sideboard. Though he doesn't get a lot of help. Thoughtseize is the big one. He only has 2 copies of that, so looks like he's going to send back his hand, not finding what he's looking for.
Yeah, I do think this matchup is just going to generally be bad. Not a lot of high impact stuff on the sideboard. Going up to 4 copies of Thoughtseize is very nice, but you know, you don't see a really powerful collection of cards. The Glare of Heresies, the Elspeths, they had the potential to do more harm than good, and he probably has to bring in those cards.
And for Michael, you know, Esper is not a deck that we've seen a ton of. You know, it's not the most popular deck. Of course, Shaheen getting second place of that deck at the Open Series in Richmond during Season 4 a little while ago, but it's Shaheen with Esper, so, you know, there's kind of an asterisk there. He's been doing that for, it seems like a decade now, so not surprising to see him have the results he has with that deck, but outside of him doing well with the deck, we haven't seen very much Esper.
And I think it's a deck that's poised to be good at least for a couple of weeks. As long as the metagame is flush with these Whip of Erebos strategies that don't have that many cards that matter at the end of the day, I think a well-tuned Esper deck can do a lot of damage.
It's Swamp plus Thoughtseize yet again here. A Sorin, a Death Dealer, and an Offensa, along with Fleece mainline. This is the kind of draw that Lauren's looking for.
Well, sort of. He's missing Greed Mana, which is the mystery to unlock this hand. It's not doing very much until then. But if he's able to find untapped Green Mana, this hand becomes quite good.
And we'll see what those temples can find as far as Green Mana is concerned, because you have to imagine that's what he's scrying for at this point. Segal does have a tough decision here with the Thoughtseize. He will consult his hand to figure out kind of the road this game is going to go down. It looks like he's going to select the Death Dealer. We'll head back Nolen's way. Nolen will draw. It's a copy of Urborg. He'll have to go with the Temple, you have to imagine. There that is. Take a look at the top card. Very quickly going to the bottom. You have to assume that's not a green source of mana, and we're going to go back Segal's way. Segal is just a Flooded Strand and a passing of the turn. Nolen will draw.
Yeah, Lauren's keeps here are very clear. It's just Green Mana or bust, and that scry to the bottom allowed him to draw Windswept Heath.
Basic Forest is what he's going to be searching for. Now the big question is, how do you lead out with the threats? It's very easy to just say, I'll tap out, use all my mana to cast an Offensa, but an argument can be made for Fleece mainline on this turn.
I think that I just want to use all the mana available. You know, there's no, power sink, syncopate kind of thing floating around here. So just be mana efficient, get the most pressure into play also.
Segal very quickly draws a card and passes the turn back, which means he has not found a land, though his draw for the turn was a copy of Bioblight. No double black mana just yet, though Nolen could help him out there a little bit, given the Urborg that he does have in his hand. Do wonder if he has any interest in deploying that. It's a real decision, actually.
Well, I don't think that he wants to play the Urborg and cast Fleece mainline, exactly because of the play you just mentioned. And he doesn't really have to play the 4th land in any case anyway if he casts Fleece mainline, so I think he will hold this Urborg back.
And this kind of play of holding Urborg versus playing Urborg, as he does just hold it and pass the turn back, it shows, just kind of the depth of the format. It would seem so simple to just say, yeah, of course I'm going to play my land and pass the turn back, but I believe it's correct to hold it in this instance. Now, Segal did draw Polluted Delta, so now he does have access to potentially double black if he'd like it, but cutting him off from that and forcing him to actually draw the appropriate land is a pretty smart play there by Nolen.
On top of that, it wastes Michael's entire turn. If he plays the Urborg, Michael gets to go end of turn, kill your thing, untap, draw land, now cast another spell, and Lauren's way behind. So even though Michael has drawn black mana, the fact that Lauren made him burn his entire turn there is a big deal.
A passing of the turn here. Perhaps he will do this on the upkeep. We will see, as he's going to sacrifice both fetch lands. Dig out some lands out of his deck. The lands he digs out will be very, very interesting as well, because he could go, with Polluted Delta, I'll get an island. With Flooded Shrine, I'll get a Plains, as he does look at his hand. Again, the concealing of the Urborg is a very big deal here.
Yep. Looks subtle. It's not something that a lot of players would think of, but the fact that Lauren knows Bioblight's a card on his radar. Michael cannot cast it currently. If I play the Urborg, all of a sudden it's unlocked. That could be a huge tempo swing.
And this is an island as well, so this will be on Segal's own end step. Looks like he's changed his mind just a little bit, but now we're going to head back Nolen's way. Nolen going to draw a card here in just a moment, it looks like. And he will. So picked up a copy of Siege Rhino. Never a bad draw.
And even though Michael may have the tools to stabilize everything, from here Lauren has a pretty concrete game plan. Attack you, Michael uses some of his mana answering a portion, but not all of Lauren's board. Follow up with another threat. Every turn I get in some amount of damage, and you're only in one spell a turn territory.
Hero's Downfall. That took care of Anafenza. Rhino's going to come in. Fleece main line already came in. Seagal's already down to 6, and he's Faith in Lethal the very next turn. And again, not playing that Urborg also has changed the way that Michael had to search up his lands. Now here's Swamp. That'll take care of Fleece main line. But the Rhino is ready. Oh, we'll draw a card. Manic Influence is what he's picked up. He's got a Sorin and an Anafenza. Those are the last 2 cards in his hand. We'll start by attacking with the Rhino, put Michael down to 2. We'll see what threat he wants to cast here, because he has to be worried a little bit about, Disdainful Stroke on the Planeswalker, or if he decides to deploy Anafenza, then you work yourselves into maybe End Hostilities territory.
Yeah, I like playing the Anafenza here, even though it does risk End Hostilities, because Michael needs untapped white mana this turn to enable that, and in a 3-color deck, there's only so many sources of untapped white mana.
You mentioned it. It does have to be untapped white mana for him to get himself out of that situation. He picked up a copy of Temple of Silence, which is, of course, not untapped, and we're heading to game number 3. Lauren Nolen going to tie things up here, and that's the kind of draw he needs. He needs to get out of the gate pretty aggressively.
Well, on top of that, Lauren also had to play very well to make sure Michael wasn't able to time his spells the right way. Going back to that last turn, that's sort of a risk-reward assessment play. Pretty hard to figure out, but the fact that Michael needs to have untapped white mana plus End Hostilities versus just having Disdainful Stroke in hand means that Lauren's play, though risky, is in practice a lot less risky than just trying to run Sorin out there. Because if there's Disdainful Stroke, untap removal spell, he has nothing.
Yeah, it's certainly bad news at that point. Then Michael might be climbing his way back into the game.
Yeah.
Might be forced in a situation where he needs to top deck a Siege Rhino, but that is not how things broke. Nolen played it very well, and that's why we'll be headed to a 3rd game here in just a moment. Players will re-sideboard just a touch, and while they do, we will talk about Season 2 of the Open Series, a shorter season than Season 1. And we'll kick it off in Syracuse.
Yep, we got a month of Standard here with Syracuse, Providence, Cleveland, and then Seattle. Nice little back-to-back set there for you. The hometown growing up, and now the current hometown of Cleveland and Seattle. Then we move over to Dallas, Worcester for a Legacy Open, and then a Modern Open Series with a Modern and Standard Invitational in Columbus, this very hall, June 5th through 7th, Origins Game Fair. Me, you, and Matthias once again.
I sleep on the parents' couch while I'm in Cleveland.
Your room has been appropriated?
Yeah, my mom has a lot of shoes.
Uh-huh.
And they're all on the bed. And she's kind of old.
Okay.
So she just kind of leaves them there now.
Okay.
My mom used to be, you know, like super clean, super organized and stuff. And she just had her birthday, December 27th. She turned 61. And now she's just like, you know what? When you come home, you're sleeping on the couch.
Okay.
All right, no argument.
Yeah.
I am sleeping on the couch. I don't have a say. So shoes, man, shoes everywhere. I say get rid of them. I don't understand why anyone would have. I think my mom has like 50 pairs of shoes.
I think your mom would probably ask the same question about your Magic collection. Why does someone need to have 37,000 cards? Decks are only 60 cards, right?
That's true.
You know,
That's
why
true.
do you need so many?
That's a sound argument right there.
Yeah.
Are you siding with my mom?
No, I'm just saying that different people's perspectives will cause them to view, you know, different things the same way.
Okay, all right. Gotcha. I just want to make sure that we're on the same
I'm sure
page.
that she has a rationale for the number of pairs of shoes that she owns.
Okay.
And in fact, if anything, is probably looking to purchase more, not less.
Well, I don't know how happy my dad would be about that, but that's another conversation. Sure. All its own.
Well, your dad's probably also got something that he purchases that you and your mom don't quite get.
Comic books.
He and I, very similar.
Yeah, you guys should have a talk.
We should.
He has over 15,000.
I don't have that many.
That's a lot of comic books.
That's a lot.
See, that's why it's okay for me to be a Magic player, because he enabled me
Right.
from a young age.
Yeah, my dad's thing is antique firearms.
Really?
Yeah, like hunting rifles and that sort of thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Are there, like, if I were to come over to your house, is there like a moose head on the wall?
Oh, it's...
I have a vision in my head of what it's like right now. I'm not sure if I want it to be that way or not.
Yeah. It's a taxidermist's fantasy.
Yeah, deer antlers.
Yeah.
And everything.
Oh, all the Sullivan houses, yeah. Oh, yeah. Didn't quite rub off on me. But.
No, not quite. Not quite. 7 cards apiece here for both players. Michael Segal will be on the play to start things off here. Game number 3 of round number 1. We do appreciate you joining us. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan at SCG Live. Hashtag SCGCOL for your tweets all weekend long. It's our first 20K Open of 2015. Segal will start game number 3 off with a Tempo of Silence. Keep it on top very, very quickly, as Nolen will pick up a copy of Windswept Heath.
And, you know, the secret for Lauren in this matchup is to try to get into 2 spells a turn territory. It's really hard for him to do because his spells are so expensive. How he's able to kind of do that last game was he was able to get multiple threats in play before Michael was in a position to answer any of them, which is how he kind of proxied having 2 spells in 1 turn. But if Michael is making his land drops and able to respond to Lauren's threats as he plays him, if Lauren doesn't have a Thoughtseize or something to break things up, it's going to be really challenging.
A Forest is what he's fetched out. Urborg's not a bad draw there. Segal already has his black mana, so not really giving any away. And now this can influence the way that Nolen wants to search up his lands. Urborg is, as many say, it's the best swamp, but you only want to draw 1.
Although some of these decks are starting to move to 2 because it's so critical. You see that more in Whip of Erebos strategies, but the second copy of Urborg is picking up.
Flea's main line will be the play. So Nolen does have a 2-drop here.
And in fact, Lauren is on 2 copies himself.
Segal's third land is a Polluted Delta. See his hand, he does have an Elspeth right now. Removal spells are options as well. Looks like he does have a copy of Hero's Downfall over there. Figuring out when he uses removal spell is the big question.
Another problem here is the land to fetch with the Delta, though I imagine at this point he would just go get an island.
I would think so. I think he's got enough black mana. But we'll see what he wants to do. Easy thing here for Nolen to do is just to get in here with the Fleece main line. That'll get taken care of by BioBlade. You saw us draw for the turn. It was a copy of Glare of Heresy, a card that we felt he would bring in some number.
I think so. Although, again, at this stage, it's not clear if it's going to really have targets this game. That was a riskier play from Michael than I would have liked to see. If Lauren plays a land first and moves into combat and has an Abzan Charm, it's pretty rough for you to have used your BioBlade that way.
I could have definitely walked into a trap there.
If you're going to do it, there's not a lot to be gained by waiting, and Lauren does have cards in his deck that could punish you. Sometimes you even see copies of God's Willing floating around in these lists. It's not impossible that something really bad can happen.
And hey, someone could spice things up a little bit to try to take someone by surprise, like God's Willing.
Yeah.
You know, the stock lists don't have that card, but you know, that's how maybe you get an edge on a tournament like this.
I'm sure I've seen at least 1 copy of God's Willing float around these lists periodically.
I imagine it's a blowout more often than not, but Nolen did not have one there. See, Segal's going to sacrifice Polluted Delta, get an island out of his deck. He's down to 19. Looks like he may have a Divination to cast.
And now the question is, can he afford to take the turn off here? I think that if he had End Hostilities in hand, it wouldn't even be close. It would be very easy for him to pull the trigger on Divination. If not, he may want to play a more one-for-one trade with your resources kind of game.
Looks like he may have second-guessed himself on his play yet again by sacrificing the fetch land, just playing a land and passing the turn back, so. Perhaps Michael a little unsure of himself in the plays that he wants to make now. Death Dealer now online and available. And here's the attack.
And Michael had the option to just Hero's Downfall last turn. Elected not to, and now can't downfall in this spot.
Yeah. He's going to try to pump again. And perhaps he was trying to walk him into that trap.
Yeah, from Lauren's position, it's, you know, you're thinking, well, he wouldn't have let me untap if he had Hero's Downfall in hand, so I might as well go for it.
Yep.
So he got his entire turn. Now, Lauren had nothing to do with his turn anyway. We know his hand's just removal spells and a Wingmate
He's
Rock.
got a Rhino that he could have played, I believe.
No, it's
no,
lands.
Okay,
yeah.
Yep.
It was low cost for him to do that, but the way that Michael played it was really hard for Lauren to suspect that Hero's Downfall was the removal spell Michael had.
It looks like he's drawn a Rhino for the turn, so I was a little ahead of myself. I always have an idea when the Rhino's coming.
Yeah.
It's just a little early. The Siege Rhino is going to come in and resolve. You saw in the last turn, Segal played an Ashiok, ticked it up, of course. Found Anafenza and Fleece Main line, among other things. Hero's Downfall being the third card. Fifth land here for Segal is a Swamp. Going to cast a Divination. 2 cards coming in for Michael. Glare of Heresy among them. Bioblight the other one. So plenty of removal loaded up here. Going to be able to tap that Pluto Delta for mana because Urborg is on the other side of the table. Glare of Heresy will take care of that. Hasn't used Ashiok just yet. I would advise that he does that.
Yeah, he's got 2 kind of juicy modes here. I mean, putting Anafenza into play is pretty nice, and just continuing to go up is good too.
He's going to go with Anafenza. He's got a 4/4 now. Ashiok, very, very good card against Hops on aggro.
Yeah, they have a lot of very powerful 2 and 3 mana creatures, which is, and they have that element, and they're also not that great at attacking early on in the game. It's a rare mixture of aspects, but it adds up to Ashiok being very good against them.
Nolen going to draw after sacrificing that Windswept Teeth. Fleeceman Lion's what he's picked up. How's he going to work his way back into this game? Does it revolve around the Elspeth that's in his hand? Well, we're going to find out right now as there is the Sun's Champion. Elevator going to be moving up, of course. 3 soldier tokens incoming, and we're going to head back Michael's way. Michael will untap his 5 lands. Got the active Ashiok over there, and a Fenta that can start attacking as well. Thoughtseize is an option, and we'll start by clearing the path with that. You'll see a Wingmate Rock, a Fleece Main line, and a copy of Glare of Heresy as the options here for Michael.
And this sets up Michael for a beautiful turn here of Thoughtseize, Bioblight your tokens, Glare of Heresy your Elspeth, do something with Ashiok. Just a really nice turn.
There are worse spots to be in. Looks like Michael also has an Elspeth in reserve in case anything does go wrong here. Doesn't have the 6th mana just yet, or the 2nd source of white mana, but you have to imagine a couple draw steps will take care of that.
Yeah, his draw steps from here are so good because every spell, or almost every spell, is going to be good for him, and land number 6 is great as well.
See Nolen waiting patiently, seeing what card will my opponent take away from me. Going to go with Fleece Main line. That's going to bite the dust. Leave him with the Wingmate Rock and a Glare of Heresy. Michael going to move forward here. There is Glare to take care of Elspeth. Ashiok will tick up. Take a look at 3 cards. Death Dealer and Siege Rhino among them. And defense looks like it might just hang back on defense. Could get more aggressive if he like. Looks like he's going to take the opportunity to do that. Bioblight will take care of those. And offensive will do this. 4 damage is going to come across. It's good, clean living there for Segal.
I don't think there's a lot to be gained by passing the turn because you're going to have to Bioblight when Lauren moves into combat most likely anyway. And you know that he just has a Glare of Heresy in his hand. So he has an answer for your Anafenza regardless. Yeah. So you might as well just kill his guys and attack.
Yeah. Looks like another Glare of Heresy was the draw. And this is kind of the issue that we talked about where, you know, you feel like you probably need to bring Glare in, but how good is it in reality, this matchup? Again, kind of tough to say, but you also don't know that your opponent doesn't have Banishing Light.
Yeah. Although, oddly enough, in this spot, these Glare of Heresies are worse than a Murderous Cut would have been.
Yeah.
I would still rather have the Glares in the deck, but it is curious.
Yeah, at least Glare has a target in the Anafenza over there.
Yeah, exactly.
So perhaps winning a small battle. There is Divination, 2 cards coming here for Michael.
That was a huge draw because if he did not find a land there, he would not be able to Hero's Downfall the Rock, but now he can.
Gonna exile 3 cards, of course. Doesn't look any creatures in that one. Abzan Charm among them. And Hero's Downfall is going to take care of the Wingmate Rock. We'll head back Nolen's way. 2 copies of Glare of Heresy in hand. Draw step will net a Hero's Downfall. He's got a way out from underneath that Ashiok finally.
But it's already done so much damage. Absorbing all these removal spells and potentially clearing a path for Elspeth.
Glare of Heresy and Hero's Downfall will take care of those 2 cards. Ashiok did a really, really nice job this game. It's just a threat that kind of makes you panic as a player, too, because something could just go really wrong.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Loren has to answer it, but this is the problem with the matchup is there's a lot of things he has to answer, and Michael has a lot more clean answers for the pressure that Loren has at the table than the other way around.
Delta going to get sacrificed. Michael going to have to search up a land here. He'll go with an island. Now, one thing to keep in mind, again, only one source of white mana here, so Elspeth out the window right now. Not an option.
Though, this is not a bad consolation prize.
There are worse plan Bs. Dig through time for 2 mana being one of them. So it's time to take a look at the top 7. Of course, 2 will come with Michael. We'll see what he can find here. His last dig through time was 6 lands and a hostility, so it's going to have to do better than that.
I think he's looking at the worst case scenario of Sorin and Ashiok.
So would you say he did better?
That's better.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's why we've got you here.
Provide the kind of analysis.
Expert's the term you're looking for.
An expertise that really no one else can provide.
Let's not sell you short. Let's not sell you short.
I appreciate it.
Michael just wants to make sure he's happy with all of his options here. As you can tell right now, he's, I'd say he's past the point where he's turned the corner. He just needs to try to finish it up now.
And not let something slip through the cracks, too. He's looking at Thoughtseize right now. You can tell he's mulling taking that one and one less Planeswalker just to be sure that his Planeswalker will stick and that Loren has to live completely off the top of the deck. But I just prefer doing this.
There's Sorin. Perhaps a Vampire token on the way? Absolutely. Tom Ross will make his first appearance of the day. We'll go back Nolen's way. Nolen with a Glare of Heresy in hand. Take a draw step. It's a copy of Case Coilus. Not all that impressive. Does he want to save the Glare here is the question. Does he suspect that his opponent has an Elspeth? We'll find out. But I have a feeling he may use it, and he does. So Sorin will get off the battlefield. We'll head back Michael's way. Michael will draw. There's a Flooded Strand right off the top. So life is good as there's a second white source of mana.
Yeah, no hesitation. And I'm sure Loren knows what that means the minute that the Flooded Strand goes to the graveyard.
Michael can't tap his 6 mana fast enough, though he will untap it and attack first. Good sequencing.
Sure.
And now here's Elspeth. Three soldier tokens. A Wingmate Rock is the draw. That is something that does fade Elspeth. Not the worst draw in the world, but it's tough to come back in situations like this. And there's a Hero's Downfall to take care of that. There's an attack for 5. Nolen's going to go down to 6. 3 more soldier tokens will be joining the battlefield. And Loren Nolen will get one more draw step, I feel. He'll pick up a Sorin and extend the hand. Michael Segal's going to win this match over Loren Nolen 2-1. Esper Control takes care of Abzan Aggro. And if Abzan Aggro starts to pick up in popularity, this could be the foil to that deck.
I don't know if the matchup here for Esper Control is as good as it would be against something like Abzan mid-range. Although the mid-range builds can make it problematic for control decks if they cap out on Read the Bones post-board. But, the comes into play tap lands, I think, were the real problematic element of that matchup there for Loren, on top of the fact that he had so many removal spells game 1. And even post-board, all he was able to do was sideboard in different removal spells that were probably better overall, but weren't that much different from just having access to Murderous Cuts the way that things played out.
And, when we took out the sideboard, there wasn't, you know, there wasn't a lot of cards from bringing. I mean, 2 Thoughtseizes, yes, those are fine, but there's a lot of redundancy in the Esper control deck too. So, you know, with Thoughtseize in this particular deck, you're not taking one card and the House of Cards crumbles. It's like, well, I'm going to choose between one of your 2 removal spells or one of your 2 planeswalkers. So